Okay, so even though we're separating these passages all the time, it's a continuation from the prior passage. So I have to read from verse 1. Okay, I'm going to read to you and then arrive at verse 7. I'm going to read to you, so, okay. As for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him, but not to quarrel over opinions. One person believes he may eat anything, while the weak person eats only vegetables. Let not the one who eats despise the one who abstains, and let not the one who abstains pass judgment on the one who eats, for God has welcomed him. Who are you to pass judgment on the servant of another? It is before his own master, and he stands or falls, and he will be upheld. For the Lord is able to make him stand. One person esteems one day as better than another, while another esteems all days alike. Each one should be fully convinced in its own mind. The one who observes the day observes it in honor of the Lord. The one who eats in honor of the Lord, since he gives thanks to God, while the one who abstains in honor of the Lord and gives thanks to God. For none of us lives to himself, and none of us dies to himself. And it continues, right? So if you think about it, the first passage we covered 2 weeks ago, it's about eating, diet, right? Diet. Okay, are you eating just vegetables or some meat as well? Anything you want to eat. And please note, they're judging each other. Obviously, they're passing judgment on each other. The one who does not eat vegetables, or the one who does not eat meat, only eating vegetables, they're judging other people who are eating everything. The people who are eating everything, judging those people who are only eating vegetables. Please note. Verse 1, as for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him, but not to quarrel over opinions. One person believes he may eat anything, while the weak person eats only vegetables. Who are the weak person here? The people who are eating the vegetables. If you think about the people who are eating the vegetables, they are more legalistic people. Oh, Bible says this and that, so you cannot do this, right? Those are the ones who learned the Bible a little bit. They know a little bit about the Bible, and they judge people based on their limited knowledge and understanding. The people who eat anything, there's two different types of people who eat anything. Who don't know anything about the Bible, or actually they know the Bible and they know they're not restricted by any law because God gave us everything to eat, right? So if they don't understand that, the people who are eating vegetables will judge other people based on, not their own opinion, but based on their biblical understanding, which is very limited. A danger of today's church is many people, first of all, do not know what the Bible says. That's the main issue. Second issue is those people who study the Bible, they think they know everything, and they pass judgment based on what they know. Bible says don't do that. Again, this immediate context tells us this is among the Christians, not unbeliever versus Christian community. Within Christian community, with all the believers, there's some variations, right? Why do we have this person who is observing certain day as a special day? For example, Sabbath. Because he or she has more Jewish background. This Roman church has Gentiles and Jews, they all combined together, right, mixed up. So Gentiles didn't care about the Sabbath. But these Jewish folks, Saturday is still the special day, right? Is it wrong to observe it as a Sabbath? I don't want to pass judgment on that, right? Is it necessary? Maybe not. But if you're going to do that, go for it. That's fine. They're trying to abide by the law. But you're not supposed to be judging them. Oh, that's the old law. You don't have to observe it anymore. You don't have to judge them. The key point was, 2 weeks ago, I have to remind you about this. We're not judging them because who are you to pass judgment on the servant of another? We have master, Lord, who is the master of us. We are the servant. What kind of servant was this? I said it's not doulos. It's not diakonos. It's not really slave, right? Doulos is slave. This is household slave, meaning they stay home, help their master very closely. Different type of slave or servant here. That means my servant, I'm going to judge them as a master. Not among you. If I have 5 of them, if they're judging each other, what's wrong with this picture? You all belong to me. That's what the Bible says. Meaning we all belong to Christ. We're under His guidance. With that, verse 7 says, "For none of us lives to himself, and none of us dies to himself." Verse 8, "For if we live to the Lord," right? Servant, household, slave versus master's relationship. Remind yourself about the relationship. Us versus the Lord. "For if we live to the Lord. And if we die to the Lord. So then, whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's. For to this end, Christ died and lived again, that He might be Lord both of the dead and of the living." So it makes perfect sense there, right? Christ is the Lord, and that's why we should not pass judgment on each other. If you attend school, right, if you work for somebody else, if you have any gatherings and meetings, how many times do you see people passing judgment on other people behind their backs? I see it all the time. At work, I see that all the time. I don't know. I usually trust people the way they speak to me. When they say something, I just take it as at its face value. I don't have time to think about it. What does it mean, really, you know? Some people are really good at that, trying to figure out the meaning behind it.
Or read between the lines.
Read between the lines, right? And when I try that too, read between the lines. Actually, between the 2 lines, there's only blank. I couldn't read anything. I don't know what that means. I kind of know, but didn't work for me. Same thing, I cannot read people's mind. Doesn't get it. I don't really get it. I don't want to know, and I cannot know anyway, right? And Prophet Jeremiah, I believe he said, you cannot know the people's mind. How can you understand God's mind, right? It's the same thing. But this happens all the time. And at one time I was at work, and then this person was very nice to me in our group meetings and stuff. But I heard her bad mouthing about our boss. And I was passing by, and she stopped talking. So I said, okay, it happens, right? It happens. Anyway, don't do that, guys. We're Christians. We're supposed to be different, right? If you want to criticize something or somebody, we can do that. We're so good at that, actually. If you want to really do that, we can do it all day, every day. We can find fault of everyone we meet and talk about that all day and every day. And guess what? If you do that, a lot of people will gather around you and then participate in the conversation. But if you want to praise somebody, if you want to tell them a good news about somebody, then not many people may join you. Yeah. but that's fine. As Christians, we're supposed to be promoting the good side, not the negative side. It sounds like a worldly motivational speech, right? Be positive, do not be negative. But that's the same principle the Bible teaches. The difference is they don't have God in their message. We do have God in our message. Our motivation, ultimate objective, ultimate reason for anything is for the glory of God. That's completely different than what the secular world is teaching. All right? So it says, to oneself versus to the Lord. This is very important to understand. Because if we live to ourselves, if we die to ourselves, what's left? Ourselves. Right? You can expand to your family, your church, your school, but still, it's to that person alone. That's really meaningless life at the end. If you read any philosophical movements from the ancient Greek to modern philosophy, nobody says, actually, living for your own good and your own pleasure will be the meaningful life for you, for anyone. Nobody says that. Even secular people, even the people who don't know God will say that that's not a meaningful life. And the Bible says some of the Christians must be doing that. So, for if we live to the Lord, and if we die to the Lord. So then, right, whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's. Let me ask you a question, though. I talked about reflecting your life on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and a monthly basis, and so forth. Have you ever remind yourself about this? Whatever I do, it's within God's providence. Whatever I do, it's for the Lord. Somehow the picture in your mindset, a lot of times God is missing from your picture. That's why we live the way we live. That's why the way we talk, the way we talk. I've seen many students in my life, some rebellious students, right? They don't want to study. I don't want to study. Why? Because they think they're studying for their parents. They think they're studying for their teachers. Come on, I've been using this analogy all the time. If you go to Harvard, you're the one who's going to Harvard. Not your parents, not your teachers, right? If you become successful, you become successful. You're not doing it for your parents. If you're a good person, you will take care of your parents, of course. But you're not doing it for them. Whatever you do that, in that conversation, in that perception, God is not there. It's either you, your parents, your teachers, your boss, your friends, everything else but God. God is missing from that picture. Think about it. How many times do you really realize that you are under God's control and His guidance as Christians? Once you start practicing that, you're always led by God, you're always following God. Once you start changing your perception about the world from here to there, right? Things will change. The reason why our lives don't change, the reason why the people who are coming to church don't change is because they forget about God. Completely. After Sunday service. That's why they're struggling in this emptiness. This person, I read the news about this figure skater, the male figure skater, U.S. person, American person, who was a national team. Now he cannot compete anymore somehow. He just committed suicide. Right? Young, talented person. Because of his own mistake, he couldn't compete anymore, and he just committed suicide. That's very unfortunate to see. But news like that happens almost every day, right? Think about it. Those people who make those decisions, I'm not judging them, right? Most likely, they don't think about God when they're making those decisions. I doubt that, right? Really. Think about it. The next portion is about criticizing other people, right? So, why do you pass judgment on your brother? Or you, why do you despise your brother? For we will all stand before the judgment seat of God. What do you mean by the judgment seat of God? I thought Christians were saved. We're not being judged. Just going to heaven. Yes. We're going to heaven if you're saved. If you have an assurance of salvation, if God chose you, then you are going to go to heaven. But the Bible clearly says that you are going to be judged about what you've done in your life anyway. Two different types of judgments. One judgment is between the believers and unbelievers, right? That's the ultimate judgment. For believers, though, we have judgment we have to go through. I mentioned this one briefly, but let's go through that together. First one, let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 5. After Romans, there's a 1 Corinthians. After 1 Corinthians, we have 2 Corinthians. It's chapter 5, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 6 through 10. 6 through 10. Let's read them together. Ready? Go. So we are always of good courage. We know that while we are at home in the body, we're away from the Lord. For we walk by faith, not by sight. Yes, we are of good courage, and we would rather be away from the body and at home with the Lord. So whether we are at home or away, we make it our aim to please Him. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. Think about it. Paul wrote this letter too, right? Paul says, I wish I could be with the Lord now, right? Meaning, I wish I could die and then go to the Lord and then have fellowship with Him. But whether I live or die, it doesn't matter. It's for the Lord. And the reason why I'm doing good works here, the reason why I'm being nice to other people, the reason why I'm teaching other people or trying to listen to that people or help other person is because we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. He's not referring to going to hell versus heaven. He's saying you are going to be held accountable for what you've done in your life. Don't think of it as this. We're all Christians, millions of Christians, right? Throughout the history, we're all going to appear in the judgment seat of Christ, and then he's going to say, folks, you did a good job, you didn't do a good job, and that kind of thing. Don't imagine that. What does the Bible say? We must all appear. Sounds like good thing. As a group, we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one, you don't want to go there, but before you go to jail, if you commit crime, they have a one-on-one conversation in the room. Interrogation will take place before you go to jail, and nobody can help you. You're going to be sitting in front of Christ, and He will account everything you've done in your life. Forget about the whole thing you've done in your life. Whatever you've done and said and thought about anything yesterday, if He brings up everything you've done, thought, and said, the words came out of your mouth, or thoughts, right? Even from yesterday, would you be okay? Thank you, Lord. I've done a good job yesterday, right? Yeah. Think about some shameful moment that you've gone through in your life. Think about the responsibility that you're supposed to fulfill as a person. When you're growing up, as a child, you're supposed to be obedient to your parents, right? You're supposed to love your brothers and sisters, help other people, right? When you grow up as a parent, you got to take care of your children and your wife or your husband. If you're a Christian, you're supposed to raise them in the instruction based on the Bible. If you're a Christian, right? All those things. And Jordan Peterson said the same thing. Don't raise your kids that you don't like the way they behave, right? Why did he say that? If I'm as a parent, if I don't like the way my kid behave and the way they speak and the way they handle other people, guess what? Peterson, his conclusion was this. You're basically raising your kids that everyone will hate. You don't even like your own kid, the way they speak and behave. How do you expect other people in the world, have nothing to do with your children, like them? As a Christian, if I don't raise my kids, I'm not saying if I raise my kids in a biblical way, they're all going to be biblical and then become great Christians. No. But if I don't raise my kids as Christian, what am I doing? Just providing money, food and shelter, and then be a good parent, you think? Unbelievers do the same thing. In fact, some unbelievers do better than you because they make a lot of money, right? So don't think of our role as Christians same as the worldly people. And all those things will be recounted, reassessed, and at the end of the day, you will receive what is due for what you have done in the body, whether good or evil. Think about it. As a church member, as a Christian, what are you supposed to be doing at church? Right? In your workplace, in your home, in your schools. Please don't forget, God is always there with you. Always there with you. Let's go to Matthew 25. If anybody has any question, let me know. Just stop me anytime. Matthew 25, 31 through 46. It's a long passage too. This is Jesus who is speaking to these people about the last things. Okay? Verse 31, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Please note, from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me. Think about it. If you see somebody needing some help, right? Do you actually help that person out? Right? I think once I told you about the story. I was at the airport, and this woman, this lady was old, a little bit old, but she didn't speak English well. I believe she was from one of those foreign countries. But she was somehow carrying some big luggage. I knew the airport because from there to the exit, it's a long walk. And she was not really walking well either. Yeah. I was carrying my own luggage, right? But I kind of helped her. She didn't even know how to say thank you. It didn't really matter. I just told her, let me help you. And then so I just took it on my luggage, and then I was carrying that. And this one guy, this American guy approached me and saying, thank you for helping her. I thought he was her relative. No, he was a stranger too, right? I feel good about that because this guy, a stranger, wanted to help her too, I guess, but somehow I took the action first. So he came to me and say thank you for helping her. That's the interaction that we want to have in this world, right? If you see somebody doing something right or well, acknowledge that too. You can do it. If you can do it yourself. And then if somebody does good, then say something, right? If something's bad, somebody does bad things, then you have to actually gently reprove them and correct them. But we're not, yeah.
Let me ask you, would that situation have occurred in any other society? Do you think? Let's say you know Koreans very well, so in the Korean airport.
Would that happen in different parts of the world?
Because I'm alluding to like Jordan Peterson, since we're going to talk about him a lot. Western society is founded upon the biblical principles.
That's right. That's right. I would say in the Christian foundation, it is possible. More likely possible, right? And if you have good people around the world, and then some may do that. But most likely, because it's in America, it could happen more often. I've seen people actually at the airport, when the military person with the uniform gets on the platform, or somehow they walk down the place, some people actually thank them. I've seen people buying them coffee. Oops. But think about it. You gotta appreciate them. We're living here because all the military people out there protecting us from the enemies, right? When you see them, thank them, right? I don't know. Military people are not really respected in different countries. In America, we respect them. I'm not sure about Korea, but
I mean, even many times when I flew, there was a casket of soldier being shipped to the commercial airplane. The pilot would come on and say, "We have a special guest," and then the moment of silence is bow our head and give a
right.
moment of silence.
What he's saying is that sometimes when you travel, the casket of military personnel who died, right, in the war zone, they're carrying their airplane. Sometimes it happens, I would say. Then the pilot will announce that we have a special guest in our airplane. Let's have a moment of silence, right? We have to acknowledge good works, all right? And this is what Jesus says. You don't have to have something glorious at church or go to the seminary and get a PhD. No. If you do something to this small people, right, the strangers that you don't know, right, then that's what you're doing to me. As a Christian, we have to do those things. I know a lot of churches out there emphasizing that activities and behaviors without biblical sound doctrine behind it. We're not asking for that just for the sake of I feel good type of thing, right? But it's for the Lord. When you see a stranger who needs some help, think of Christ instead. And do the best you can to that person, right? If somebody has some speech issue, I remember somebody from my old church, nobody wanted to talk to that person, right? Because they have some speech issue and then some intellectual challenging issues and all that. But okay, it doesn't have to be me, but those are the people who come to a certain people and talk to them, say hello to them because they're nice to them, right? So be open-minded and be merciful because God is merciful upon us. He didn't have to save any of us. If He saved us, if you remember that, if you know you're dealing with Christ, you will be different. The way you do, the way you speak, the way you deal with other people as well. All right? Didn't have a chance to go to the conclusion, but remember, activity, good works will not save you. But if you're saved, your good works have to take place. It has to happen.